This is an AIC Insights video from the Northeast Ohio Ag Innovation Center. The topic of this video is legal startup steps for farm businesses or value-added businesses. I'm Peggy Kirk Hall, Director of OSU's Agricultural and Resource Law Program, and also a partner with the Northeast Ohio Ag Innovation Center. In this video, I'll cover that organized process that you can follow to start up your business. That includes a number of forms, registrations, licenses, and record setups that are necessary to formalize and make that business legally recognizable. That might be something that you've already started. Perhaps you've covered bits and pieces, but in this video, I'll try to help you ensure that you follow all of the steps necessary to be in that complete state of business formation. I'm not going to cover business entity selection, however. That is a topic that I'll cover in another video where I discuss those options between LLCs, sole proprietorships, corporations, and so on. So here is a linear progression of those startup steps to follow to set up your business. We begin with choosing the name, work through the process. Some of these steps do have to occur before the others, so I have set it up here for you as a linear process. And then we end with step 8 at reviewing your property and liability insurance. I'll work you through each of these steps in the process. So let's start with step 1, and that is choosing a business name. Now, if you're just operating as a sole proprietor, it's very common for a sole proprietor to use their personal name as the name of the business. You don't have to have a different name. Your name and the business can be one and the same, but you can choose a different name. If you are going to set up as an LLC, then you must have a unique name that is legally referred to as distinguishable on the records from other registered businesses. And that name would be approved through the LLC registration process. But any business entity can also use another name, what we refer to legally as a trade name in Ohio, or a fictitious name, or a doing business as name. That is a name that you can adopt for your business as long as it's registered with the Secretary of State in Ohio. And the Secretary of State has wonderful resources on choosing your business name to help you determine if the name that you want for your business is available. You can go online, search the Ohio Secretary of State's website, and discover whether that name you want is already registered and not available, or whether no one has claimed that name, and therefore you can hold it. You can go ahead and file and obtain that name for your business. So I've given you a resource here on the Secretary of State's website called A Guide to Name Availability, and that will work you through the process of finding and verifying whether your name is available. Also, if you want to adopt that fictitious name, it explains how to do that as well. So the second step, once you know your name, and if you are going to organize as an LLC or a corporation, which is a formal business entity, is that you'll need to register that formal business entity with the Ohio Secretary of State. You don't have to do that if you're a sole proprietor. It's the LLC, the one we most commonly see, that is going to need to take this step, as well as a corporation. So that process is pretty simple. You can do that online, or you can send it in to the Secretary of State. It's simply filing what is referred to as the Articles of Organization. And in that form, you will need to have that business name, the address and appointment of the person who's responsible for receiving legal notices for that business. And we refer to that person as the statutory agent. So you'll need the name of that statutory agent, and you'll need their address. And you simply file that. Currently, it's a $99 filing fee. That can change, of course, but Very simple process. Wait for that to come back as approved, and then you are registered with the Secretary of State as an LLC or a corporation. Step three then is to obtain your federal employer identification number. Think of this as your identification for tax purposes. Think of it as the Social Security number for the business. Sometimes we are allowed to use the Social Security for a number for a sole proprietorship, but the recommendation is to remove that Social Security number from that business identification and instead file for the federal EIN. And you have to do that if you're a formal business. Very simple process again. You can apply online with the Internal Revenue Service. Pretty simple to do. So beware, though, that many people, many businesses, many shams out there will try to get you to use them to file for your EIN, and they'll charge you a rather exorbitant filing fee or a cost for doing that. Don't use those because it is freely available online. You simply submit that form. There is no cost for obtaining your EIN from the IRS. So, simple process again. You'll need to do that when you go in to establish a bank account. Bank accounts do want to have that EIN tied to that bank account. Now, as I said, sometimes a bank will allow a social security number to be used for a sole proprietor, but that's going to be up to your individual bank. But opening that separate bank account in the name of the business is certainly advisable, and you'll need the EIN to do that. And then along with that, that's a perfect time to set up your separate business, financial, and tax records. That will make your life easier in the long run to have the business records, the business account separated from your personal accounts and records. Now, if you'll be selling food that would be consumed on site, or if you're going to be selling any non-food items that are taxable, then you'll need to collect a sales tax. In order to do that, to collect your sales tax and pay that to the state of Ohio, you'll need to obtain a vendor's license. This is also a pretty simple process. There is a small registration fee. I believe it's $25 currently, but you can file and pay online through the taxohio.gov website now. Pretty simple process, but you have to have that vendor's license in order to make those sales tax payments and to collect those under that license number. Again, that's only if you're going to be selling food that would be consumed on site or certain non-food items that do have sales taxes attached to them. Step number 6 is to identify your employer responsibilities. If you will have one or more employees, then there are going to be a whole host of responsibilities that come along with that. You'll need to report your new hires, you'll need to withhold taxes and Social Security, perhaps self-employment tax, workers' compensation, a lot of requirements for what we referred to as employee. And remember, your business is your employer for yourself in many of these situations. So you will need to do that for yourself as both the employer and the employee under some of these laws. These laws can differ from our typical agricultural laws that we see for employers that are hired for farm-based labor, those that are just out working in the production, in the field. The laws can differ there. So if you're doing value-added agriculture, different types of processing, food processing, those kinds of product processing type activities, just be aware that those employers will be treated differently than our typical farm-based labor in the field. And so there may be different employer responsibilities that come into play. Really good to refer to an attorney or an accounting type service that can help you set up those employee requirements. Many of them already know what to do, will know what you need to do, and can just work you right through that process. Be aware too that we are developing an agricultural employers checklist and a webinar on that process that will be available to you as well. Step 7 is to determine any other licensing and permitting needs that you may need. Now, that sounds big, but that's because what you might need is going to depend upon what you're doing. If you're going to be creating food, for instance, then you may need a food license. If you're building new structures, you may need to go through zoning and the building code and the fire code. Those other kinds of permitting requirements might apply. Typically, in agriculture, and if you're building a building or a structure that is supporting an agricultural land use, such as a barn, that is used to support that land production, that crop production, a permit may not be necessary in that case. In most cases, it's not. But if you're doing something different and you need a structure, something different than a barn, it's a good idea to check that zoning and check with your zoning inspector to see if that type of structure does require a zoning permit and also would be subject to building code and fire code and perhaps some septic requirements. It all depends upon what you're doing. So be sure to have those discussions with your local zoning inspector. Also, if you are considering a business that would be based within the home, you'll need to see if your local zoning does allow for that type of home-based business or home occupation. There could be some restrictions on that. For instance, some of them require you to have so many parking spaces available if you're going to be engaging in retail sales, or some of them don't allow retail sales at all. So you'll need to check your local zoning to determine what is and is not permitted and whether you do need any of those permits, as I mentioned. So a number of different things there that you'll need to explore and determine in regards to other types of licenses or permits. And then finally, don't forget to review your property and liability insurance. This is really important to the survival, the risk of your business. And when we start doing different activities in agriculture that we see with our value-added agricultural businesses, the insurance that you have in place may not cover those activities. Or if you're starting up a new business, your homeowner's policy may not cover that home-based or farm-based business. If you already have a general farm liability policy, that might not cover an activity like direct marketing of food products, for example. So sitting down with your insurance provider, reviewing what you're doing, and making sure that you have that coverage available or take the steps to add that coverage for those activities that you'll be doing in your business is really important to reduce your risk. In fact, a policy that you might have could explicitly exclude some of the activities that you want to do. So don't assume that you're covered just because you have a good policy. There are a few needs to consider if you are a value-added agricultural business, some specific provisions to review with an insurance provider, such as if you're within the home, if it's a home-based business, what do you need? Do you need food product liability? What about equipment coverage? What kind of equipment are you using? What kinds of equipment damages might you see? And what needs do you have to insure that equipment? Are you bringing customers onto the property? Are you making advertising claims? Are you transporting your goods into urban areas, for example? Are you selling them at a farmer's market? Many issues to review and discuss with your insurance provider. So that's a quick review of those 8 steps that I think will get you in pretty good shape for starting up your business and being ready to proceed with your business activities. You can find more of our agricultural law information on the Farm Office website at farmoffice.osu.edu. We have an ag and resource law library that covers a number of different topics that should be helpful to you as you pursue your businesses. Thank you, and visit us again at the Northeast Ohio Ag Innovation Center.